Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julian Robinson, Director of Estates at the London School of Economics and Chair of the Higher Education Design Quality Forum. Sorry, we had a few sort of technical issues to sort out before we could get onto this. So sorry for the delay. The first thing to say is that HEDQF is delighted to be part of the Festival of Learning. And secondly, a welcome to all of you joining today. I, for one, know just how busy these current times are for directors of estates. I don't think I've ever worked so hard. Anyway, and last but not least, I'd like to thank my fellow discussants, Dr. Ghazwa Alawani-Star, who is Pro-Vice Chancellor and Director of Property and Facilities Management at the University of London, and John Plummeridge, Director of Estates at Birmingham City University. So the format of the webinar will be, there will be three of us who will take in turns to give our reflections and thoughts on the current situation and how things might develop in the future. And then we're going to attempt to address those questions that we've listed in the abstract. We'll then seek to explore some of those themes that emerge from our discussion and then open up for discussion to questions from the audience. So I think without further ado, I'm going to turn to Gaz to share her thoughts on how the COVID pandemic is impacting on our universities and how it might shape their future development. So Gaz, welcome and over to you.
Thank you, Julian, and good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, thanks for inviting me to take part in this event, and thanks to the sponsors for the event, as well as Step Connect2 for organising it. A very important issue for us to discuss, which is the impact of COVID-19 on estates. Greetings to everyone who has joined this event, and well wishes to all of you and your families, which has just become now the tradition for starting these kind of conversations. So I guess the reflections on the impact so far and of what we know. Of course, we're still living in a time of uncertainty. I guess the first thing that happened at the University of London was just a quick mobilization to respond to extraordinary events that really no one had any experience of dealing with before. Our first concerns was dealing with anxious students, anxious parents. Those were our priority. Visitors to our buildings, people who've just been or planning to come, planned teaching, conferencing, social events, dealing with tenants. The University of London is a landlord for a large property portfolio. Overnight, London, suddenly things became very quiet. London literally emptied, and it was very eerie actually coming in and out of London for the first few days of the lockdown, and just seeing the impact that the lock-in had. We were lucky at the University of London because about 3 years ago we had put in place activity-based working for all professional staff. So all of our professional services were equipped and able to work from home, to work remotely. Very, very quickly. Of course, that wasn't the case for our colleagues in the academic departments. Much of their remote working relied on their desktops being switched on in offices, and actually many of them didn't have the capacity to work from home and access the required servers. The challenge then really for us, and was during that time, of course, immediately, is to how we enable staff who needed to continue to work and to do so safely. We had students in accommodation. We needed to provide security. We have most of our halls are catered halls. We had to provide catering, and these services became even more critical when students were not able to leave and everybody was in lock-in. So quick risk assessments, PPE supplies, which were in short supply everywhere and for everyone, coupled with the slight guilt about ordering them or depriving the NHS from them, were all the kinds of things that were going on at that time. And then we, of course, had to look after works on site, contractors, suppliers, deliveries, health and safety, etc. during that time. The estate team, I guess, had to be even more agile and had to become really good at communications. And to be honest, in my 40 years in facilities management and property, I've often found that communications is not necessarily one of our strongest qualities. I guess many of our colleagues traditionally prefer to be in the background sorting everything out for us than being in the spotlight, and many of them actually got thrown into the spotlight in dealing with the impact of COVID-19. As soon as we settled into a mode of operation that seemed to work, and that took a number of attempts to get right, to be honest with you, there were a number of trials and errors. We started almost immediately planning for return. Obviously, social distancing, health and safety, provision of fire exits, supplies, compliance checks are all in full swing at the moment as we plan for reopening our buildings. We're aiming to have our main buildings open at the end of the first week in July. We don't expect a massive turnout. Colleagues are feeling a mixture of comfort in that they are able to work from home, but also anxiety about travel into London and coming into our buildings. We understand that the tube capacity is going to be operating at around 15%, and all of our work on social distancing has resulted in buildings capacity of around 20%. And of course, this will have and is having a significant impact on our academic and operational delivery. And at the moment, we are prioritizing the face-to-face activities that we will need to make happen. At the University of London, as with many other institutions, of course, the COVID-19 has meant a massive and sudden drop in income, and also additional financial outlays to provide additional resources. I'll give you one little snippet. In the provision just of taxis for our cleaning and security staff at the beginning of this pandemic, we were looking at bills touching £100,000 just in taxi fares a month. So you can imagine the impact that would have. We've also had to refund halls fees, conference bookings, event bookings, etc. So the financial burden has been significant. That has been a multi-million-pound loss in that space of time. Amongst all this, we had to manage uncertainty, anxiety, and ambiguity on an hour-by-hour basis. I don't think it has been helped in the length of time that we've had reasonable access to information really from government. But to be honest, in my experience of managing emergencies over many years, states are always expected to have the answers. We often have to act within ambiguous situations because our services can't wait. People still need to be kept warm and be fed, and we need to have clean spaces. So we often cut through ambiguity by making decisions, which we of course have to live with the consequences of quite often. But I think estates professionals are quite experienced in having to do this. We've also been very conscious of the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on BAME staff. So actually about 3 weeks ago, as soon as this started to become apparent in the press, we conducted specific risk assessments to address the needs of BAME staff, and a result of which we issued, for example, full plastic face shields to all of our security staff weeks ago, and did not wait for the report that came out this week. So is this going to be a blip or a new normal? Who knows? I think there will be some lasting impacts. I think the loss of income is going to mean that there will be cost reductions, staff reductions. We will inevitably have to be operating with less resources for some years to come. I think there will be a move for more people working from home as colleagues get used to the idea and managers get used to the idea that their teams are effective working from home. And I think there will be residual anxiety in relation to being in crowds for some time. Finally, I think what happened in relation to the killing of George Floyd as a context in the US, coupled with the unequal impact of COVID on BAME population, will also have a lasting impact. I think addressing racism in all of its forms and inequalities will, I'm sure, take centre stage. And at the University of London, equalities and access to HE has been part of our DNA since our formation in 1836, and this is becoming even more important now. All of those things make a difference in the way that we design our buildings and services. Agility, flexibility, and good communications have always been an requirement, and now more so, and they are my main takeaways. The other important thing is collaboration. The University of London is lucky to be a confederation of 17 world-leading institutions that are based in London, from varying in size, from the mighty UCL to medium-sized and specialists like the LSE. Julian Robinson's on the line, as well as the Royal Academy of Music and the Courtauld Institute, with our properties primarily in Bloomsbury. So the benefit of collaboration with colleagues with member institutions has been incredibly helpful, just bouncing ideas off each other. And finally, from a personal perspective, I love people. Anyone who knows me will know that I work best when I'm bouncing ideas off colleagues. So I really, really miss that. And although I often complained about my very crowded commute into central London, for the majority of the time with my height, standing under someone's armpit, I really miss the buzz of London. I've always loved it. My most important takeaway, personal reflection, is how grateful I am to my team who rose to the challenge like supermen and women, and really just got stuck in and did what was needed. About 20 years ago, I read a book called Built to Last, and I highly recommend it to you, even though it's 20 years old. And the one takeaway from it was that you should always recruit people who are better than you in at least one thing. And I have adopted that principle ever since. And in dealing with this issue, my team have shown that they are better than me in many things and in many ways, and I'm very grateful to them. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gaz. Can everyone still hear me? Can you hear me, Gaz? Good. Okay. Well, I'll back on with what I was going to say, and then leave John to finish up. So basically, in terms of what this is meant for the LSE and the LSE Estates Division, our very successful business model is predicated on attracting large numbers of overseas students, actually over 50%, and large numbers of postgraduate students, again, who make up over 50% of our student body. In addition to that, we run one of the largest summer schools in the world and have a significant international sort of distance learning program and executive education offer. Unfortunately, this has meant that we've been really heavily impacted by COVID pandemic. And what we are facing, like Gaz, is a huge loss of income, both for this financial year to the end of the 31st of July and for 2021. Like all Russell Group colleagues, we're looking at making significant cuts, and we'll be seeking a loan facility to bridge the gap in income. So it's very serious for universities. The impact on the Estates Division is that in terms of capital development, virtually all planned projects have been suspended, and long-term maintenance expenditure has been reduced to the bare minimum of health and safety and statutory compliance. In addition, we're making a 10% cut to all recurrent budgets. We're not renewing leases, and we're looking to reduce our space footprint. Currently, 300 of my staff are currently furloughed, and there is a vacancy freeze, and it's very likely there will be no pay rises this year and possibly the year after. So how and when are we planning to reopen? We're planning a phased return over the summer, which will actually commence later this month for a limited number of staff. However, in terms of the student body, we won't return until September. Although research students will come back earlier. Lectures will be online, but there will be face-to-face small class teaching. The staff and student population on campus, I reckon, will be roughly 50% of what it would have been in normal circumstances. Social distancing rules will apply, and given the latest research from the WHO, which was published in the Lancet recently, it's very likely that students and staff will be wearing face masks. All aspects of opening will be subject to risk assessments, inequality impact assessments, a common theme as echoed with Gaz. And we'll be following the principles of the UUK guidance and indeed UCEA, which is the University and Colleges Employers Association. They published 6 principles to guide for a safe return. And of course, last night we had the DFE publishing their advice on how and when universities should reopen. Will this be a temporary blip, or will it be a new normal? Well, my suspicion is there will be a desire to return by and large to the pre-COVID reality. And whilst we need to be transition arrangements, the goal will be to offer face-to-face teaching in 2021. Universities will no doubt mirror what is happening in wider society. So if gyms, bars, public libraries, sports activities and schools eventually return to normal, so I believe will universities. Some changes, particularly in respect of teaching delivery and the use of office space, I think will endure, and I suspect sanitising stations will also remain over the university campus. But as I've said, I do not think, in my opinion, there will be a paradigm shift. I suspect that the growth of online meeting and conference platforms, combined with the imperative of the climate emergency, will reduce the need for academic business travel. And talking of travel, I think we're likely to see a permanent shift to a more cycling and working to work culture. In terms of its delivery on impact of delivery of learning and support services, clearly there's going to be much more emphasis on FM and cleaning and security, which I think will be much more active, visible, and indeed valued by their university communities. With social distancing in the short term, there'll be significant changes to how we teach, fewer classes, less learning space on campus, and the availability to things like bars, gyms, shops, etc. Will it change the way we design and plan our universities and the way they operate in the future? Well, I do think a rethink is necessary. As I said, I think the footprint of universities may reduce as they try to bridge lost income. There will be more working from home, as Gaz has said, and the office environments will be adapted to agile working. Now, colleagues at the University of London are ahead of LSE. We've been to visit your accommodation, Gaz, and the very impressive facilities there. We're going to be doing the same, I have no doubt. I think the importance of outside space will have a much greater recognition, and it will be used more and will also have to have the use of more natural ventilation. And I think campus identity will become even more important. So I think we have to ask us, how does the physical campus make you feel, and how can it offer a different and distinctive experience from the virtual world? I would like to see the campus as a sort of refuge or a safe space from the digital world. I've certainly had enough of sort of just working off screen. I find it quite exhausting, and I do yearn to get back to sort of the physical campus. So I think providing facilities for greater human interaction and collaboration are going to be vital. On the downside, there will be a break on capital and facilities expenditure, as Gaz has alluded to, and I think it could take many years before most university balance sheets return to the pre-COVID situation. And I think, back to the old mantra, we will be expected to somehow do more for less. So what have we learned so far? What are my main takeaways? Well, I've got about 4. I think a time of crisis does bring everyone together. The force of collective goodwill and action I have found very invigorating. All of my colleagues have stepped up to the plate, and I do think we will come through this stronger. I do, however, think there is a fundamental tension between a socially sustainable campus and place of work and a socially distanced campus and place of work. And I think that is going to be very much down to the designers and behavioural psychologists to address exactly how we respond to that. The crisis will accelerate both the move to agile working for staff, as I've said, and blended online learning for students. And the purpose of the campus will need to be reimagined. But I think outwardly it won't look a lot different. In terms of finally personal reflections, well, the truthful answer is I've never been busier. I'm working longer hours, and there seems very little respite between meetings. You just flick between Team and Zoom all day, trying to multitask on emails or paying attention to the meeting you're on. I call it death by screen. And actually, I have been caught out. I was answering a tricky email on another subject on screen, and the chair of the meeting suddenly invited me to comment, and I completely lost track of where we were on the agenda, and I had to do sort of Boris Johnson and wing it, which honestly is not my style, and it was excruciating. And so, it's added pressure, I think, just trying to do too many things and multitask at once. On the plus side, my allotment has never looked so good. So rather than doing a daily gym session at the Students' Union gym, I've been down there digging, sowing, planting and watering. But in truth, as I've said, I want to escape my dining table and get back to campus and start seeing, touching and feeling the estate. I look forward to the camaraderie, the spontaneity and actually the humanity of work, the work environment. And above all, I actually want to go for a pint at the end of the working week with my work colleagues to relax, converse and offload in a completely different environment. Okay, that's me done, and I'll pass you now over to John.
Hello. Can everybody hear me now? Yep, all on. Okay, right, good. I can see lots of thumbs up. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. It's been really an unprecedented kind of experience we've had here at BCU. The sudden powering down of the campus was quite a difficult thing to achieve, and decisions about draining down buildings and risk assessments had to be progressed at quite lightning speed, I think, in terms of all of that. We are quite a broad-based university in terms of our vocational base. We don't have an over-reliance on international students, and we are reasonably cash positive. So our situation, it's not looking too bad, actually. We're not dependent on too much external income, and we're also not exposed to residential losses on any great scale either. So we are in a relatively healthy place, I think. Also in the centre of Birmingham, quite a vibrant, lively city, a lot of confidence pre-COVID in the economy. Whilst some of that has inevitably ebbed away, the underlying factor, the belief in large infrastructure projects like HS2 make us a lot more optimistic, I think, for the future. So, huge cultural change and lots of difficulties. We are working seamlessly, really, as one department with health and safety and IT. I think we've virtually merged with them now, because all of our activities and planning is subject to risk assessment and the dependence of new technology. The new technology and new ways of working and agile working has really taken off substantially at the university. There's some phenomenal take-up of Teams meetings, almost to the point of where it is getting a little bit too much. And looking forwards as well, the Vice-Chancellor is very keen that we don't return to the old traditional one-to-one desk-based office support type of approach of scenario. So we've split our planning up really into two groups looking forwards. The first one is agile working. We're looking in great depth at the ratios of office space, desk spaces per person, and all of the support departments. And we're getting a very clear direction that we're not going to return to the old days. We want to move forwards and release office space for use of education and delivery. We are very much a face-to-face based university. A lot of our students come from disadvantaged backgrounds, so they come to be in our buildings, they come to be in the city centre to enjoy the space and enjoy the social interaction. So the second group that we've put together, really working on future planning, is to analyse all of the teaching space and look at what can and can't be delivered post the COVID in September. We have already opened up our City South campus, the Seacole complex, for some interim training for third-year medical professionals and also for retraining of NHS critical staff. So very early doors, in fact, 5.5, 6 weeks ago, we had to build a socially distanced environment access system quite quickly with hand sanitizing stations, welfare designated toilets, and a special cleaning regime put in place, used for the ground floor only, and one-way system as well. So we got off to a bit of a flying start with that. We've used that learning, that information, to develop some more plans to open up 3 more buildings in mid-June as a kind of, almost as a kind of test bed for September. So our main Curzon complex will open for some teaching in mid-June, as will parts of the School of Jewellery, Specialist Access, and also parts of the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. I should say that those openings are subject to generic risk assessments for the building access and egress, but then also specific task-based risk assessments. So cleaning regimes are put in place where students are using particular types of equipment. And I think during the early phases of COVID, everything will be subject to these risk-based assessments and risk reviews going forwards into the new term. One of the things we've had to do is take a sort of step back and look at our teaching stock. And we've completed a teaching space model that has gone through and analysed all of our central pool and the big specialist spaces. And we're starting to apply calculations to reductions in density in those spaces. You end up with variances of somewhere between 25 to 30% of normal capacity. And that's where our calculations are ending up. So we're now reviewing the teaching day, the contact hours. The overall pledge the university has given to the market is that 50% of the learning activity will be face-to-face. So that's quite a challenge for us. But the Vice-Chancellor wanted to make a statement to the market that prospective applicants that if you do decide to attend university this year, this is what you'll get. I think it's very important that universities set out almost a kind of social contract and clearly early doors for September so that students can make their own decision about coming on campus. Life won't be the same for them on campus, but we are hoping to make it as positive an experience as possible, with the emphasis on things like open space, on managed social interaction, and the minimisation of one-way systems running through the buildings. So, yeah, like Julie and I've not getting very little sleep. We tend to be doing 8-9 hour days in facilities at the moment now. We've never been so busy in our lives. And the effort, I think, also is with the coordination of the different facets of health and safety management that run all across, right from the cleaning, the security, the printing. Every process needs rethinking across the whole university. So the scale of it is quite phenomenal, really. And obviously orders, everybody's ordering PPE. We have also been fortunate enough, we've got quite a lot of 3D printers and workshops. They've geared up and are producing visors and face masks quite a lot. So we've been a producer and a supplier of those to the health trusts, and we're going to carry on with all of that work, utilising all the university's assets. I think in terms of our sort of takeaways here, I guess it's the speed of change. I think the having to cope with that, and also the psychological impact it does have on people. My team are a very social team. We like to be together. We like to bounce ideas off people, and there's a limit to how much creativity you can deliver, I think, over looking through to each other at screens. You really do need to have to physically be together, I think, and the different personalities need to be given a chance to shine in a social environment. I think you just can't do that online. So a lot of difficulties for us in that area. I think the academic community, we have quite struggled quite a lot as well. Certainly in our institution they have. I know that through talking to a lot of our academics, and the mental adaptation they're going to have to make to get back to work. I don't think it should be underestimated in any way, shape or form. So our outlook is we're reasonably positive. Just on the capital, we have suspended all our capital as well, apart from our Steamhouse and Belmont Works project, which is a £52 million new build incubator scheme and experimental computing. That has managed to keep going. Quite a few of the construction sites in around Birmingham have managed to keep going or have stopped for relatively short periods. We were lucky, we just hit it at the right time, I guess. We were in the ground, so there was a lot of large plant and very few operatives on site, so social distancing worked okay with that. But looking forwards, my suspicion is there'll be an immediate hold on capital, but I'm a little bit more positive. I do see that being released and relinquished as we come out of things towards the end of this year. And I say that for two reasons, really. The first thing is I do think that UK PLC is going to have to do something to re-kickstart the economy, because there will have to be some activity, there will have to be some movement. And then I think also internationally as well, there'll have to be quite a bit of movement on that as well, if we're not to see mass unemployment and something tantamount to a depression. So, there's quite a lot we can control. We don't feel the need to be unnecessarily pessimistic, but we are going to have to, inevitably make some budget cuts, become more economic, and review things very carefully, and particularly look at agile working for reallocation of space. So that's me, really, Julian.
Thank you, John. There are quite a few questions coming through, but one I just wanted to ask the panel was, is it going to be 1 or 2 meters social distance? Because clearly that makes a huge difference to our capacity to teach and function. And any views? Gaz?
Well, we're working on the 2 meters because this is the advice that we have now. Our teaching tends to be for postgraduates in the UK, tends to be for postgraduate students and in small numbers. But just like everybody else, that's still proving really challenging in terms of accommodating the groups that we have. Of course, our member institutions use our spaces for teaching. So the floor plans that we have produced for all of our teaching spaces are based on 2 meters social distancing until something else comes out. And I haven't had a chance yet to look at what came out from the DFEs this morning in detail. I'm still working on the 2 meter social distancing requirement. Okay.
And John, what about yourself?
Yes, we're on 2 meters, very much so. I think it's based on the science of the transmittance of droplets in breath in the air, sneezes, etc., etc. So until we get better guidance, our working assumption is 2 meters.
Yeah, and at the LSE, I mean, it was 2 meters, but I've also now been told to look at 1 meter. So we've got to do each of the studies twice now. I think what we'll do in order to make sure we answer the questions is go through them now. So I have a question from Robin Palmer, and he says, are there any access control systems being put in place with regard to entry to buildings and with or automating any entrances? So I suppose that's controlling people coming in. Now we have quite an open campus at the LSE. So the answer to me is that we're not at the moment looking to do that, apart from some maybe a physical presence. But I don't know, Gaz, are you looking at this?
Thank you, Julian. To be honest with you, I don't know what we will end up with. I have had conversations with the Met Police around security of buildings. You know, when people are coming in with masks, etc. You can imagine the security threat is still on severe. It hasn't dropped. So we're just mindful of security now being more difficult if if people are coming in with masks, etc. But we are putting in plastic shields, for example, at receptions, and putting access control by way of managing crowds rather than necessarily, for security at this stage.
Okay, thank you. And John, what about what's happening at BCU?
Yeah, we already have full access control for all of our non-specialist buildings. So, and that's quite a lot, really. We have plastic screens up for all receptions everywhere, including the access control and non-access control. What we'll do about access control in terms of limiting in the future, there's no plans to do anything at the moment now, because we currently have it pretty much. If we do need to, we can if people report symptoms. I think a lot of this is going to be down to what happens with track and trace as well. Once we get notifications of that, how that policy rolls out, I think is going to be critical to things like the 1 and 2 meter assumptions and all the rest of it.
A quick question again to you all is: are you considering temperature checks as students and staff for that matter come into your buildings? Gaz?
Not at the moment. I think it presents all sorts of issues to academics in an academic environment. So not at the moment.
Agreed. John, what about yourself at BCU?
Yeah, same view. Exactly the same.
Yeah, and that's the view that I have, although I do have pressure from some within NSE to instigate that. I have a question now from Rupert Goddard. He says, what function do you see large-scale lecture theatres fulfilling in the future? Is there a vision for remodelling them for smaller groups? That's actually a pretty good question. Gaz?
To be honest, we're struggling with the capacity of space so much at the moment that we're quite grateful to have the larger spaces. So I'm not necessarily looking at remodeling them to create smaller spaces. In fact, we probably will end up utilizing the larger spaces more than smaller spaces at this stage. Who knows what will happen as we do more modeling. At the moment, I'm grateful to have some larger spaces. We're keeping hold of them.
Yeah, so we've got a sort of space model, and we're looking at the larger lecture theatres, rates lecture theatres. Certainly in the short term, we're going to have some form of taping off of seats so that there's a diagonal and there's no 2 meter clash across them. And then some form of redesign of the access egress on a one-way system. So each of our spaces, basically in the short term, the capacities are going to be radically reduced in spaces like that. Very, very low assumptions, low capacity assumptions for those. The other thing we've got to be careful as well, of course, is the HVAC and the air changes scare and the situation with the plant in those sealed spaces where you don't have any natural ventilation or any movement. So you have to be very careful. And that's very much a watching brief with our engineers at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say that's the same at NSE. We're actually grateful for our larger lecture theatres, whereas in the past we're thinking, my goodness, what we're going to do with them. Now we can only fill them with sort of 20% of the people. So that's actually now quite useful. So we're not looking to convert them, I have to say. A question now from Sonia Scott says, will there be work for design teams to possibly convert university spaces to accommodate less students and make the most out of the spaces? And if so, will they be tendered through OJEU? Well, what I would say from the LSE, just to start this off, is that we're going through our existing frameworks. We just don't have the time to OJEU. John?
Yeah, no, we seek support from frameworks, really, but a lot of our team have done it manually. We have a reasonable in-house kind of CAD section, layout section. Not in-house, but we do seek support from frameworks.
Great. Gaz?
Yeah, I mean, same, nothing really to add. I know there are more, I can see more questions on the chat, so nothing to add to this one.
Thank you.
I agree with you.
Right, I have a question now from Rupert Cook, and says, one of the challenges will be the integration of online and physical. Are you excited by the great potential for innovation in the way blended teaching changes both in pedagogy and physically? How might this happen? Now, that's a whole load of questions in one. I'm excited, but I think it is a bit of a sort of a push into the unknown. What we have seen remarkably is that all teaching in the summer term went online, all exams went online, so it can be done. And I was absolutely astounded at the speed that was. But I'll be honest, I think at the moment we're just almost reacting and looking at the very immediate and how the earth we're going to get the campuses reopened for September. John.
Yeah, no, it is exciting. It's forced certain departments in the universities to move at quite a quicker pace than I think they would like. But one thing they do all value is the face-to-face, the dialogue, and the social. For us, it's quite a lot of it is about forming a social function as well, about getting students out of their homes onto campus, you know, so they can develop as human beings, really. And it's that kind of element, I think, that is the most important thing that has to be clung on to in all of this, is the ability to socially interact and move in on campus, I guess. But it is exciting, and we are going to be looking at a lot more blended learning as a result of this, and more of a emphasis on the specialist physical aspects of it as well, that blend, so that, you know, there will be a lot more, and there may be some remote learning going on from the campus itself, you know, in the nice spaces that we have, and in the courtyards, and in the external spaces, you know.
Gaz, are you excited?
Always. I mean, the University of London is lucky in that 50,000 of our students, of course, are distance learning students across the world. So for us, we've always had this sort of online model, but like Julian, I have been really grateful, surprised, and delighted to see how quickly we've gone to online exams, for example. So we've had tens of thousands of students sit online exams in the last week, and that is something new for us because we're very traditionalist at UOL around exams. So yes, I am excited. I think the exciting bit will be where face-to-face teaching isn't actually what's delivered online. It's when the online material is designed to be online from its inception, rather than having to very quickly be adapted to be delivered online. I think that's where we will see really exciting developments happen in teaching, as the case actually at UOL. It's initially designed online.
Okay, thank you. Now, I realise we've got a lot of questions, and we are going to go over our time slot, but because we started late, I'm hoping they're going to give us 10 minutes the other end, so we can try and address a lot of really interesting questions. So the next one is from John Ridgett, and it says, how much will the demographic upturn in 18-year-olds help universities? And do you think international students will come back in similar numbers? Start with you, Gaz, on
that. Okay, so so we're in contact with many students from across the world through our distance learning programs. And to be honest with you, we're not any clearer than the recent reports that you would have seen that says something like 1 in 5 students are thinking about deferring for a year, about 20%. And also many students from across the world are looking closer to home. The honest answer is, I think the 18-year-old, the demographic upturn in the UK will help enormously. I think university is still a really great destination, particularly where at times of recessions, because there are no jobs to go to. And now we've also got the additional restrictions on travel, so no sort of year out to take. So I think university is a more popular option and will remain a popular option for the next few years. On international students, I'm not going to try and predict, to be honest. The only thing I can predict is London. London is globally, in demand. People I've spoken to in business, I've spoken to the centre of London. They expect that it will return to its previous vibrancy. I think international travel will be significantly affected, and I think that will be impacted. I'm taking my cues from the likes of BA and what they have done to their fleet. They're not expecting quick recovery, and I don't think we should either.
Okay, thanks. I mean, from our perspective, I think it's very similar. So I think undergraduate numbers, and this is, I think, is to answer another question that comes up. Our undergraduate numbers are very good, so we think that's fine, particularly from home students. It's the overseas market this year, which I think is going to be pretty much affected. We're a postgraduate market dealing mainly with sort of 1 year masters, and it'd be so easy for those students just to put it off for a year. I do, however, think that it will come back, particularly for institutions that do have sort of a fairly sort of high level and sort of unique offer. But I think we're going to just have to take quite a lot of pain, particularly in the Russell Group, for the next year, because I think there will be a big downturn in terms of take up from overseas. John, what about your views on this question?
Yeah, 18, very good. The upturn for 18-year-olds, very good for us. Pre-COVID, we were modelling some massive expansions based on that. I don't think there will be the expansion, but I think it's good for our business. And our international business is a very interesting one, because the majority of our students up until this year were from China. And I do think, taking a step back internationally, what happens with the relationship with China will be critical. Because if you look at what's happening with at the moment now, there's all sorts of, there's the trade war with the US, there's all sorts of dynamics going on with China's relationship with the world. And I do think that will be absolutely critical how that plays in the coming months. Our international business from India was actually growing and has now got bigger than China. So I do think the Chinese factor will be a very, very big turning point for the future, culturally.
Very good point, John. And that's nothing to do with COVID. That's geopolitics. But I'll take your point. Next question, which I can happily duck out of, is from Laura Thomas, and it's: how do you see labs and other research facilities operating in the post-COVID environment? John, I'll turn to you first.
Yeah. So labs have been subject to our spatial assessment that we're currently looking at now. We have quite a lot of specialist labs across the institution, and lowering of densities and increasing of one-way systems. We're quite lucky in so much as a lot of our buildings, the more modern stock is relatively more adaptable to good, solid one-way system planning. So we're relatively untouched, but I think some of the buildings where there are multi-labs in older proportioned buildings, I think there's going to be some real issues for movements and geometry, just general geometry of the ins and outs of those buildings. And the other thing is, generally, we're trying to reduce the density of pedestrian flows to general teaching so that access is easier for the labs. And then you've got the issues of the technicians as well, and the cleaning regimes within the labs itself.
Okay, Gaz, do you have any comments on this one?
Very few, really. I mean, the only research lab that we've had operating during COVID has been the one that led on the establishment of that the loss of smell is a key symptom of having contracted the virus. But it's it's very small compared to what John would have. So social distancing and health and safety considerations. That's it.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Jamie Hamilton, and says, with lectures traditionally being the biggest draw for bringing students onto campus, are there any thoughts on how students may be attracted onto campus if fewer lectures are taking place? Good question, Jamie. John, views?
Yeah, one of the things that we were looking at before COVID, I mean, we have quite a lot of good-sized parks and open spaces around the campus. And one of the things we're looking at is some form of, pop-up events type of program for students to come and, obviously observing social distance. But they're a lot easily managed in the open air. They're a lot easier to manage in the open air. So we're looking at things like the Curzon Park and areas of open space outside buildings for pop-up events, impromptu, gatherings, or and management of those. I do think by then as well there will be the culture of social distancing, and the behaviours of students will be a lot more accustomed to the idea of keeping apart from each other rather than bunching together in clusters. This whole behavioural thing, I think, will bed down. I mean, we did see it when we had our Seacole building open for interim use. The students quickly adapted to the idea of social distancing and were very, very sensible and measured, actually. So there will be some form of events and some form of program to attract students onto campus from our perspective.
Gaz, views?
So we have got a huge amount of experience in online inductions, online creation of communities through our distance learning programs, and this is really now becoming even more important. So for me, a huge amount of income for the University of London comes from the halls of residence. So we have started a hashtag Safe to Stay London. I'm hoping to share it with member institutions so we can see whether we can, adopt some principles. The research shows that students come to university, 60% is about forming their personalities, finding themselves and making friends and creating communities, leaving home, learning to live on their own. And about 40%, even less than that, is about teaching and learning. So I think that rite of passage of leaving home and creating your community and enabling students to feel safe and for their parents to feel confident that their kids are going to be safe is going to be really important. But I think it will happen. I think there's more about going to university, and the online and blended teaching will come on its own. We are having to provide more learning teaching spaces in halls of residence to facilitate this.
I'm going to probably take one last question. There are a lot of questions on the chat, and what I'm going to ask the organisers is if they could sort of save those, and I'm sure John, myself, and Gaz will sort of pen some lines to go against those. So we won't ignore those questions. Thank you very much. It's obviously a very interesting topic to everyone. But the last question I'm going to take is from Steve Howe from University of the Arts. And he said, LUPC, so that's the London University Purchasing Consortium, has asked for moderation on ordering masks, particularly type 2, due to NHS requirements. Is that affecting your thinking with ordering PPE? Now, we know that UCL have issued a public statement this week saying that students will be wearing masks on campus. I think the LSE is rapidly coming to that view as well. And it's not just because it's a sort of a reassurance thing or publicity thing. There is now this peer-reviewed research which has been published in the Lancet this week, which I think was sponsored by WHO, which says, yes, there is significant beneficial effects, not only for health workers, but for members of the public, obviously protecting themselves from each other. So the answer to that, John, to Steve, is that it will have to inform our thinking. We'll maybe have to look outside of traditional procurement avenues. But I think universities, particularly where you've got very compact universities, like with thousands and thousands of students, like at UCL and LSE, lower number of students, but even more densely packed, we cannot maintain 2 metre social distancing. So it is going to be like the tube, it is going to be like shops, and the government advice is, wear a face covering, wear a mask. Gaz, your views, please.
I agree with everything you've said, and I'm hesitating from making any statement that I'm not going to be able to live by. At the moment, I have no idea where I'm going to get them from. Although I get loads of emails every day saying to me, you can order PPE from us. I'm sure everybody on this call is getting them. But of course, you have to have, checked suppliers. You have to be assured of the quality. So nothing further to add, really, at this stage.
Okay, John.
At the moment, we're in a position where the masks have been very much encouraged, but have been regarded as a personal choice to the individual, because of their various circumstances, what they're doing, their own personal risk assessments. So appreciating, where the research is going, we've not made any institutional moves to purchase any more. That being said, we have had some donations of masks from universities abroad, actually, who we have partnerships with that do comply with, and so we are making those available. But our stance is, at the moment, it's a personal choice thing.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much for all those that have attended this webinar. It was a sort of a first for us. So thank you for bearing with us with the early technical difficulties. Thank you very much to Gaz from University of London and John from Birmingham City University. And also thank you very much to James Lee and Step Connect for hosting us today and allowing us to have this discussion online. As I say, we will make sure and send out a note to those who have participated in this to make sure that we do answer the rest of your questions. But on that note, I'm going to say goodbye and now go to my 8th back-to-back team meeting of the day. So thank you and good afternoon. Cheers.